Good morning and welcome to our Backpack to Briefcase episode on preparing for graduate school. My name is Elise Newberry and I am a career coach for marketing, sales, and international business students here at the Huntsman School of Business. We have created this Backpack to Briefcase series as a way to talk with recent graduates, alumni, and professionals in the industry about all things career preparation. We are excited to welcome our panel of guests here today who will address the important topic of preparing for graduate school with our students. We've got McKenna Rogers, a current information systems undergraduate student who will start her Master's in Management Information Systems program this coming fall while working at General Mills as a data engineer. And Lizzie Bickmore, currently working towards her PhD in finance at Virginia Tech, was also a CGO research fellow and is a Huntsman alum. And then we also have Craig Mont, a USU finance and econ alumnus, Harvard MBA graduate, and current director of Salt Lake Market at Cache Valley Bank. For those of you watching live, please feel free to leave comments and questions in the chat. We will definitely prioritize your questions as we go along. But for now, welcome everyone. Let's get started with the easiest question. Walk us through your journey and your decision to pursue a graduate degree. Let's start with McKenna.
Alrighty, thank you. I don't know if I have the most applicable story. I coming into college knew I would pursue my graduate degree. Growing up and through some of my very developmental years, my dad was pursuing his, and I've always looked up to him and always kind of wanted to be him. So it's always been the plan to get my graduate degree. So I don't know really how applicable that is or if everyone has that kind of story, but that's been something I've always known I was going to do.
Yeah. How about you, Lizzie?
So when I was at Utah State, I started getting involved in CGO and realized that I really liked research. And then over the summer, I think of between my sophomore and junior year, I had an internship. And while I was there, I just wanted to go back to school and I wanted to go back to doing research. And so I kind of realized that's what I wanted to do. And so I started talking to my professors about becoming a professor. And deciding to get a PhD, and they were all really supportive and helpful of that. And so that's basically it. I realized I really just like school. So
personally, that's the process I went through as well. I just loved school. So I was like, how can I keep this going? Yeah. How about you, Craig?
Nice. School I enjoyed, but when I got out into the workforce, decided I didn't love it. I didn't want to be a professor. So I did want to advance my career, though. I saw that a lot of people were getting MBAs. Some people I really respected at Utah State, Paul Felstead being one of them. I'm sure you guys all know him. I just admired his path. I talked to a lot of people out in the workforce who had gotten MBAs. And so that was just something that I decided that I wanted to do to help kind of further my career and give me more opportunities and help broaden my network. So that was my reason.
Great. So there are tons and tons of programs out there for graduate school. How did you decide which program was right for you?
For me, my undergrad is in information systems with a data engineering emphasis. And for me, trying with that, I could go into stats, CS, I could go to data analytics. But I'm just a huge nerd and I love data and I wanted to kind of further my education in data engineering. So I picked the program in which I could further my education in data engineering, but also in web development as well.
McKenna, I want to follow up quickly with you because you're staying here at USU. Why did you decide to stay?
I love my department. They are so supportive and I didn't necessarily want to leave them. And I also love Utah State. But aside from that, I have been able to start my master's in my undergraduate. So like this semester, I'm taking pretty much all master's classes, all graduate classes. So being able to have those transfer, it was easy to stay at Utah State.
So making a total switch, going straight to PhD. How about you, Lizzie? How did you decide that Virginia Tech was your program?
Yeah, I used my professors at Utah State a lot to kind of bounce off ideas of where I would apply, as well as once I started getting interviews and getting into schools, which one I would pick. And when I applied to schools, we only applied to like schools in the South because my husband did not want to live somewhere really cold. So that kind of cut out a lot of schools and limited where I was going to apply. But of the schools that I got into, the faculty here really made a big difference on why I picked this program. A lot of them have similar research interests to what I'm interested in researching, as well as just the structure of the program. Virginia Tech gets started really early on doing research. And so I already have 2 working papers right now, whereas a lot of other programs, they don't get you started until your 3rd year. So that was, I think, the biggest thing for me.
Okay. Craig, how about you?
Yeah, so I knew pretty early on that I wanted to do an MBA versus a PhD or a master's in something else. And so for me, it was the top 10. I wanted to get into a top 10 program. Top 10 programs are where you get the best network and you get a good recognizable brand. Coming out of an MBA, especially for business undergrads, you don't get a lot of technical skills. And so you really want to maximize the other 2 things, your brand and your network. And so, you throw your application to as many of those top programs as you can. And if you're lucky, you get into 1 or 2. And so I would have loved to get accepted to all of them, but I didn't. And I just took the one that I liked the most. So HBS, I think if you get accepted to Harvard or Stanford or one of those schools, you go. Yeah. It's kind of a no-brainer. So
yeah. That's definitely not what we would consider settling.
No.
So.
No.
So there's a lot of questions, at least we have with undergraduate students, about what are the materials, what pieces of information, how much do students have to prepare for the application process. So operationally speaking, what materials did you have to prepare for your applications, and what resources did you use in order to not perfect them, but definitely polish your materials?
For me, I think the biggest 2 were my statement of purpose, so like why I want to get a master's and why it would be helpful in my career, and then also your letters of recommendation. For the statement of purpose side, I think you just need to be like, find your why. Why do you want to do this? Why is it important? And why do you think it'll help you further and advance your career and your education? To go through the polishing of that, couple faculty members, as well as family members, friends, peers, just reading over it, saying, do I know English? Kind of thing. And then on the flip side, your letters of recommendation, I reached out to a couple faculty and mentors that I have been working with through my years at Utah State, but also people that I've met during my internships, whether that be a supervisor, a mentor, or other employees at the places that I've done my internships.
How about you, Lizzie? What was your process?
Yeah, for me, so with PhDs in finance, the cohorts are really small, so you have to apply to a lot of schools. So I applied to, I think, like between 12 and 15 schools. And so some of the materials differ just a little bit. A lot of them had like essay questions in the applications, but most of them, it was along the same lines. You have your statement of purpose, you have 2 to 3 letters of recommendation, and then your scores for either the GRE or GMAT in my case. And I think probably the most important thing, like McKenna said, is the statement of purpose and then the letters of recommendation. With more research-driven programs like a PhD in finance, you want to have your letters of recommendation be from professors that you've worked with. So I had Ryan Whitby and Ben Blau as 2 that I'd worked on a paper with at Utah State. And then I worked with Paul Felstad as his TA. So I was able to use those 3. And both Ryan Whitby and Ben Blau have connections with some of the schools that I applied with, knowing other professors. And so that was really helpful.
And then for me, it was similar. Every MBA program has a slightly different application package, but most of them are going to be, 1 to 3 essays. So they'll give you a prompt and you have to respond to it. Similar to like a statement of purpose, but they're asking about your background, asking about your reason for wanting to do it, asking about, an experience that you've had in your career that defined you, those types of things. GMAT is what I took. I think some of them take the GRE, and I think some of them don't require it anymore. It just depends. It depends on the MBA program.
Yeah.
Letters of recommendation were also important, and then I think there were grade transcripts or something along those lines. But it is an involved process. Each one took a fair amount of time. So that's what I prepared.
Yeah, there's just so much importance in getting to know your faculty members, even if you might not think a graduate program right after school, after you finish your undergrad, is what you're going to do. Still having that network and connection can come back years later. And yeah, it's so important, even just to get involved and to be collaborative with your faculty members. So we've got great faculty. Want to always plug them and thank them for everything that they do for our students. But here's a particular reason why getting connected is important. So I'm going to skip around because we had mentioned statements of purpose. So what advice do you have for those who are starting to write those?
I would just say reflect. I think part of the reason when I was writing mine, I went back to when did I even decide I wanted to do this? And again, for me, that was a while ago. So I was like, okay, what at that point made me decide it? And then once I decided, why did I continue to want to do it? Rather than say, actually, never mind, college is hard. I don't know if I want to keep doing this, but just saying, you know what, it is hard, but like I'm up for a challenge. I like this. And so I think knowing when you wanted to choose it and then why you still want to do it.
Yeah. Lizzie?
Yeah, I think like letting your personality shine through is really important in your statement of purpose. They're going to read a ton of statement of purposes. So being yourself and making sure that you show like who you are. I got told a lot of times to make it like a story about you. I think that was a helpful way to approach it. And then just making sure you get a lot of eyes on it. The more eyes that you can get on it, looking through, catching any weird things you say is better.
Yeah. And like Lizzie said, just to put some numbers on that, Harvard gets like 10,000 statements of purpose every year. And when you're an admissions officer, they go through and they read all of those. And, you don't have one reading all 10,000, but they're each reading probably 1,000. And so thinking about that, what you don't want to do is tell the admissions officer what you think they want to hear, because everyone is doing that same thing. And I think the best thing that you can do is tell an authentic story about yourself and, dig deep to something that makes you different, that displays who you are. Even though you're typing it, you want to show, you don't want to tell. So you want to, convey an experience that really demonstrates the kind of person that you are, but, do it in a way that distinguishes you from the other 9,999.
Yeah.
It's easy.
You are your own unique, like there is no other you, and you're the best. So Take a chance.
Take a chance. Yeah. I would say though, put yourself out there a little bit, maybe be a little vulnerable but be authentic to who you are and write in a way that an admissions officer is going to look at it and it's going to be memorable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One place I always recommend students go to is the Writing Center on campus. At the very least, just checking grammar.
Yeah.
And saying, does this make sense? Like McKenna said, do I know English? And is it legible? That's a great place to have as a resource too. But switching gears, I believe all four of us have taken either the GMAT or the GRE. I had to take the GRE before going to grad school, and I ended up going to a program that didn't require it. So that happens, but it's a good experience. What are some tips and tricks that you all recommend regarding these graduate entrance exams?
So I don't have any tips and tricks because I didn't take it. My program, so that's my tip and trick. Don't take it. Find a program that doesn't take it. Just kidding. But yeah, my program doesn't require it, so I didn't end up taking it.
Nice. There are programs out there, so do your research.
I think one thing that I would say is start studying as early as possible, and take it as many times as you can. I think the first time I took it, it was like a big shock. Like I wasn't ready. And so I needed to take it a few more times. And I was able to take both the GMAT and the GRE. My programs would accept either. And so I think, and I did much better on the GRE than on the GMAT. And so if you can take either one, I would suggest trying both because you might be a lot better at one than the other.
Yeah, I would say treat it like you're training for a marathon or any race. And that, it's something that you can get better at. It's something that you can practice. And so what I did is I bought a book. I took the GMAT and I bought 2 books. I bought one course that talked about the structure of the GMAT, how the questions worked, how the test was run, because it's got its own kind of unique test style that you probably haven't experienced before. So that was really helpful in understanding how the test worked. And then I bought another book that was like 300 or 400 past questions that they asked on the GMAT. And I just did as many reps of those as I could. I took the pre-test 2 or 3 times, just like I was training for a race. And then I went in on race day with my sweatband on and I took it.
Yeah. They're not as scary. At least for me, it wasn't as scary as I anticipated it being. Was that same experience?
Yeah, for me, I don't know how it was for you guys, but you go into a little testing center. There's a computer, you've got a little cubicle, you've got headphones, and the person at the front lets you in, and you kind of take it. You start by yourself and you finish by yourself. So it's different than like when I took the ACT in high school. Everyone's kind of crammed into a classroom. It's really, it was just a different experience. So,
would you echo that, Lizzie?
Yeah. I mean, it's long and it's not a fun test to take, but it's not scary. And if you prepare, like you can get better over time. So
I don't remember the headphones, but I do remember the small room that I had to sit in, and it was like 3 or 4 hours. So bring water. If you can.
Maybe I'm making the headphones up, but or maybe I just wore my own. I don't know.
I think they gave me earplugs. So
maybe that's what it was.
Headphones, but maybe
that's what it was.
See, McKenna, you're missing out.
Yeah, darn. I love tests.
So part of the interview, or like part of the application process, includes interviews for many programs. At least mine did. So what advice can you share with students about that portion of the application process, if that was a part of your process?
That also is not a part of my process. But I don't know if that's because the faculty knew me as a person beforehand. But just interviews in general, I would say just be real, be authentic. Don't lie. There's no need to, and they'll catch it. If you don't have experience in a certain thing that they're asking, it is totally fine to say, I don't have experience in that, but this is how I would go through the motions if I did experience that.
Yeah.
So I had a few different interviews with some schools, and it was over Zoom. I had some phone calls as well, and it was during deep COVID. So a lot of times in finance PhDs, they'll fly you out and do some interviews like that. But with me, it was all virtual. So I think I had like a phone call as a first round interview with one school. It was Virginia Tech. And then I had a second round interview, and it was a big Zoom meeting with like 5 of the faculty and me. So I was a little intimidated at first, with all of them there. But I think, just like McKenna said, be yourself. I also did a few practice interviews with the faculty at Utah State. They were all really helpful. I did a practice interview with Danju Sheng at Utah State, who had just graduated from her PhD program. So that was helpful because she'd just come out of it. So she knew what they were looking for. She'd just done it recently. And so find people like that have, recent experiences interviewing, as well as just writing down or at least thinking about possible interview questions. With my interviews, they ask a lot about research experience, research interests, as well as like your background in math and other things that are relevant to finance. So just knowing those questions and knowing how you'll answer them is really important.
Yeah, I just would echo those same things. Practice. It's something they're typically not going to ask you questions that come out of the blue. They're things that you can anticipate and you can get comfortable with. This is the same for business school interviews as job interviews. I always tell people to come up with their 3 money stories, the stories that define you. And no matter what somebody asks you, you can usually find a way to work in one of those stories. And again, it's that show, don't tell, just show people the kind of person that you are. And so I think that's just generally good advice. For MBA programs, they usually try and push you on questions that make you a little uncomfortable. I worked for General Mills at the time, and I worked on the brownie desk, and we just launched this delicious brownie, and it was really good. And the lady who was interviewing me asked me how I felt about General Mills' role in the obesity crisis in the U.S. And so that's the type of, it kind of controversial, but what she was trying to see is, do I have a backbone? Am I going to be able to come up with an answer and stand by it? And so I think those are the hardest types of questions that you're going to get. But the other thing that they're trying to judge is, are you the type of person that's going to interact well with other students, that's going to interact well with faculty? And so those are the things that they're judging as you're doing the interview as well. And so learning how to be comfortable with an interview and just working on your interpersonal skills makes a really big difference in helping you do well in those interviews.
Yeah. To put you on the spot a little bit, Craig, what's one of your money stories that you have?
Oh gosh, you're gonna put me on it.
It's
been a long time since I've interviewed. I'd have to think of a new money story. What was a money story? Well, how about okay? So from that brownie example, I was working with the Sam's Club buyer, and in Sam's Club, there's one spot for brownies. So you go to Walmart and you buy brownies, and you'll notice there's a ton of brownie items. But at Sam's Club, you're competing for one spot, and you're competing against the 2 other major brownie suppliers. And one day, the buyer just starts emailing me these random questions. And I could tell she was getting ready to shop our brownie. And it wasn't, trends were down, things weren't going great. And so I called the R&D team, I got the marketing team in, and I said, look, it looks like the buyer is going to be shopping us. We need to come up with a response for when she comes and tells me, hey, we're gonna bring in another brownie. So the R&D team went to work. They made a better brownie, more chocolate, more cocoa powder, and then inevitably the day came when the buyer said, hey, we're going to put this out to bid. We came to her with a new brownie package. We had a food chef prepare the brownie, had the buyer come out. She tried the brownie. She loved the new packaging. She loved the brownie. And she said, I'm not going to shop it. I'm going to keep it. If you guys can give me, this pricing on it, we'll do it. And so through that, I was able to save the Sam's Club brownie. So if you go to Sam's Club and see the Betty Crocker brownie, that was my work a long time ago. I haven't done anything with it in 10 years, so I can't really take any credit for it now, but it's a really good brownie too.
So it's important to be able to have these stories to be able to reference, and you can reference them in different ways. That I can think of 3 or 4 questions for an interview that story could have applied to, right?
Yeah. Tell me about a time you faced a challenge.
Yeah.
Tell me about a time when you succeeded. Tell me,
Mhm.
you can take that story and kind of twist it a lot of different ways. Not twist it, but just kind of
Adjust it. Yeah.
adjust it. Yeah.
I love it. So moving on to our next question. What was a big lesson you learned as you researched, applied for, and then started graduate school? Start with
So I haven't quite gotten to this started officially. But
Started.
I think it started. I think my biggest lesson was that you don't have to experience everything in college, and that you can experience things outside of college. I had this like quarter life crisis where I was like, I need to leave Utah. I need to go to school somewhere else. Like this, I don't know what it was. There was like a week where I was just like insane, and I was like, I have to go somewhere else. And I was actually talking to one of the individuals who works for the MBA at Utah State, and we just know each other, and he was telling me that a lot of people think I have to experience everything while I'm in school. He's like, but you can absolutely stay in Utah. One, it's going to be cheaper for you. Two, all of your credits will transfer the way you want them to. And he's like, and then when you're done, then you can go experience all of these things that you want to experience. You don't have to do them right now. And so I think that was probably my biggest lesson is it's okay to kind of do things that you're comfortable with and that you know, and then go experience those unknowns outside of school.
Lizzie?
Yeah, I think as I started grad school, like in finance programs, a lot of times the first year is the hardest. Like they front load you with really hard classes. You have a lot of like econometrics and economics classes. And it was a big shock. And I think I had come from doing well without trying super hard in my classes in my undergrad to having to work super, super hard just to be like, average in a lot of my econ classes with the econ PhDs. And so I think a big lesson that I learned was just doing my best and then not stressing about it, which was a really hard lesson for me to learn. I think in grad school, you get really busy. There's a lot on your plate. There's a lot of stress, but it's really important for you to prioritize your mental health as well as prioritize your physical health. And so I think that going into grad school, students need to know that and make sure that they do prioritize those things, because without prioritizing that, you're not going to have a very good experience, and you might as well not do grad school if you're not going to enjoy it. So
Very true. Grad school is probably my favorite time of school, personally. Craig, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I have, a ton of lessons that I learned. Here's one that maybe people don't talk about a ton, but on the financing side, I think that, grad school, particularly top 10 MBAs, are really expensive programs.
Yeah.
And so kind of understanding, I would say, just spend time looking at what the cost is, how you're going to finance it, and then what your job prospects look like after the MBA. There were certain fields that it was just really hard to go into after an MBA because you just didn't make enough money. And so I think that that's something that I would just consider. It's like people don't like to talk about finances, but it's a really big financial decision. It's like buying a house. I think spending time thinking about that is really important. And I think any of us would be happy to have that conversation if people had questions about it. I won't get into specifics, but just think about, like, that's an important thing to be thinking about. It may not always make sense. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, timing can be a huge factor, especially with finances. Seeing what resources are out there. There are some schools that have scholarships, but also what would it be like to have a graduate assistantship? I'm sure at the big programs, they might not have that as, I honestly don't know as much about those. But my own program, we had assistantships, and that helped financially with that. So that was
Yeah, MBAs don't usually have
Yeah, I don't think so.
assistantships, but the research programs, I think, typically do. Not always, but they typically do.
Yeah, I think in finance, it's very typical to, because I'm a graduate assistant as well as a research assistant. And so my tuition is waived and then I get paid a stipend.
Yeah.
And it's not as much as you would make coming out and getting a job in finance, but it's a lot different than getting a master's in finance and having to pay for it. So it is a little bit more like a job than other graduate programs.
I also had an assistantship where it waived the fees. But I was in housing, so that's completely different than the business world. So, yeah. I love to ask this question. It's one of my favorites. We've already mentioned a few entrance exam resources, but are there any books, resources, podcasts, people that you all would recommend for our students that are considering going to graduate school?
I would suggest, I know we've talked about them before, but the faculty, especially because most of them have gone to either a PhD or grad school or both even. So I think talking to them about that process, especially whether you want to stay at Utah State or not, go talk to maybe the program that you would look into. And they can kind of talk about their program, and not that it would be, nines across the board or anything and be completely similar to other schools, but you can kind of get an idea of what grad school would look like specifically in that program.
I'll echo McKenna on the faculty. I know we've talked about that a lot, but when I did decide I wanted to get a PhD, I met with pretty much all of the finance and a lot of the econ department professors that had gotten PhDs and just talked to them about their program, the specific school they were at, as well as just advice that they had. And it was really helpful. I think as far as like books or other resources, I had a few like micro textbooks that I started looking at to prepare for my program, as well as the book Mostly Harmless Econometrics. And so that's more like program specific, but I would just get used to reading, either papers or just the sort of material that you're going to be looking at in your program, just to get kind of accustomed to that. So it's not as much as a shock when you enter the program.
Yeah, that's great.
I think there's a website called Poets and Quants, which talks a lot about MBA applications. So I checked, it's still there and it's still very active. I don't know about podcasts, but from a people standpoint, your best resources are going to be people who went to the school that you want to go to. And so I would just talk to as many of them as you can and hear their experiences. And it helps you build a network of people too. So,
yeah. We have got a couple of videos on how to network with people you might not have met in person. So anyone watching, I highly recommend checking those out and using some of the scripts and resources through LinkedIn, through our alumni and faculty and friends directory, all of that. Speaking of, I do need to ask the question, are you all comfortable with our students reaching out to you on LinkedIn if they want to learn more? Love it. Great. So doesn't look like we have any questions, but that doesn't mean they won't pop up later. But for now, I do want to thank all of you so much for coming together and talking about this. Grad school can be really intimidating, and each program varies so much with their requirements and even their timelines. We didn't even talk about timelines of applications. So it's great to see a good variety of programs here in Utah, but also out east. My program was in the Midwest. For everyone watching, I would say we've got tons of events coming up at the Huntsman School of Business. So be sure to check out the calendar to see what's coming up. I know we've got 2 more events today alone for Focus Friday. So be sure to get active, but you don't have to do everything. To echo what McKenna said, you've got plenty of opportunities to get involved even after you graduate. But once again, thank you all so much. We so appreciate your time today, and I hope everyone has a great day. See ya.
Thanks.
Thank
See you.
you.
Thank you.